A baseball can leave the park in exactly one way, over a fence 400 feet from where it started. But the sport has found roughly a dozen different emotional registers for that single event. Some home runs are so common they barely interrupt the hot dog vendor's walk up the stairs. Others have only happened a handful of times in the entire recorded history of the sport and get a Wikipedia page within the hour. Here is the full spectrum, ranked from the home run equivalent of a polite golf clap to the home run equivalent of a city declaring a public holiday. I should mention up front that the only home run I've ever hit in my life happened during a company softball game off a pitcher who was visibly trying to lose on purpose so the interns wouldn't feel bad. I still bring it up at parties. Hit a ball over a fence with nobody else on base. This is the home run equivalent of ordering a coffee. It happens constantly, nobody applauds particularly hard, and the guy who just did it jogs around the bases with the enthusiasm of someone returning a library book. Roughly 60% of all home runs in MLB history have been solo shots, which means the majority of this supposedly dramatic offensive event is statistically kind of a shrug. The crowd cheers because that's a social contract, but you can feel the energy of the stadium quietly checking its phone. I want to be clear that hitting a baseball 400 feet is an absurd physical accomplishment, regardless of how many people are on base. It's just that baseball has spent over a century training its audience to treat the solo home run the way you treat a coworker saying good morning. Acknowledged, appreciated, instantly forgotten. Same as above, but you brought a friend. This is where things start to matter competitively. A 2-run shot can flip a 1-run deficit into a 1-run lead, which is the baseball version of finding $20 in a coat pocket. Genuinely useful, mildly exciting, not gonna change your life. The runner on base usually does a little extra fist pump rounding third, the way you do a little extra fist pump when you parallel park correctly on the first try, and there were witnesses. 2 friends this time. Now the bench is standing. Now the broadcast cuts to the opposing pitcher's face, and the opposing pitcher's face is doing something between a wince and the expression of a man who just remembered he left the oven on. 3-run homers are the ones that announcers describe as backbreaking, a word that implies the pitcher's spine is now a structural liability for the rest of the game, which, emotionally, it often is. Bases loaded, 4 runs in, and a level of chaos in the dugout that looks like the team just won the actual championship instead of a single at-bat. The grand slam is rare enough to be special. There are only so many times a half inning produces 3 runners on base who haven't already been stranded by someone's pop-up to second, but common enough that every team has multiple players who've hit one. It is, statistically, the home run equivalent of a really good performance review. Deeply satisfying, occasionally life-changing for the moment, but not something anyone writes a museum plaque about. Roughly 1 grand slam happens for every 300-something home runs hit league-wide. You will see several a season if you watch enough baseball. You will see 0 in your entire life if you're the guy I played softball with who once popped out with the bases loaded so weakly that the ball didn't clear the infield dirt. Be the very first batter of the game and immediately end the suspense before most fans have finished finding their seats. This one isn't rare, but it's a specific flavor of dramatic. A leadoff homer sets an immediate tone, like walking into a job interview and announcing your salary requirements before anyone said hello. It tells the entire stadium, the opposing dugout, and the broadcast crew exactly what kind of afternoon this is going to be, all before the second pitch has been thrown. Rickey Henderson hit 81 of these in his career, an MLB record, which is the home run equivalent of being so aggressively confident at parties that people start expecting it and get disappointed when you're normal for once. Sit on a bench for 8 innings doing absolutely nothing, get summoned with 1 shot to make an impact, and immediately deliver. This is the baseball version of being asked to give a toast at a wedding with 0 preparation and somehow nailing it. The pinch hit home run requires a hitter to go from cold to physically explosive in the span of 1 swing with no batting practice, no rhythm, and often a very specific, very narrow situational assignment from the manager. It is an objectively harder task than hitting a home run as a starter who's been seeing live pitching all game, and it gets roughly the same celebration as a regular homer, which feels like a societal oversight. I have never once been summoned for anything in my professional life. The closest equivalent is being asked to present a slide I didn't make 5 minutes before the meeting and getting through it without anyone noticing I didn't know what was on slide 6. Hit a home run that ends the game immediately, on the spot, with your own team's bat, in front of your own fans who now get to go home happy instead of finishing the bottom of the ninth in quiet dread. The walk-off is where baseball stops being a sport and briefly becomes a movie. The pitcher's job collapses in real time. The crowd doesn't just cheer, it erupts in that specific way where strangers in row 34 hug each other. Teammates pour out of the dugout to mob the hitter at home plate like he just defused something. The defining feature of the walk-off isn't the home run itself, it's the fact that the opposing team has to stand on the field and watch the celebration happen to them, fully sober, with nowhere to hide and no more outs left to fix it. There is no equivalent humiliation in my own life, because nothing I do has stakes high enough to be humiliating in front of a crowd. The best I've got is losing a board game in front of my in-laws, and even then, somebody usually pretends it doesn't matter. Combine numbers 4 and 7. End the game with the bases loaded in your own team's final at-bat, turning a deficit into an instant, deafening victory in a single swing. This is the rarest combination of high-leverage situation and maximum possible payout that baseball offers without literally setting the stadium on fire. It has happened only a small handful of times in postseason history. Kirk Gibson's hobbled, fist-pumping shot in the 1988 World Series remains the gold standard, mostly because he could barely walk to the plate and still somehow launched a ball into the bleachers like his knees were a rumor. The walk-off grand slam is less a home run and more a controlled demolition of an entire opposing team's season, broadcast live, replayed for decades, and occasionally turned into a documentary. Hit the ball, somehow not over the fence, and then sprint around all 4 bases before the other team can throw you out, usually because the ball got lost in the outfield, deflected off a wall at a strange angle, or because the center fielder simply face-planted. This is the one event on this entire list that has almost nothing to do with raw power and everything to do with chaos, speed, and a small miracle of bad outfield positioning. It is statistically the rarest type of home run in the sport, rarer than a grand slam, rarer than most walk-offs, because it requires both an unusual defensive mistake and a hitter fast enough to capitalize on roughly 4 to 5 seconds of confusion. There's something beautifully undignified about it too. The batter isn't admiring a towering fly ball, he's running for his life like he just remembered he left something in the oven, occasionally falling down rounding third, occasionally getting thrown out anyway in a play that ends with him face first in the dirt for a home run that looks on replay suspiciously like a guy who tripped during a fire drill and got applauded for it. All of the above simultaneously with your team's entire season on the line and not one single out left to spare. This is the theoretical ceiling of the sport. The home run that doesn't just win a game, it ends an entire year's worth of narrative in a single swing, on the bleakest possible scoreboard, with the other dugout already mentally halfway into their offseason plans. It has happened so rarely that you can list nearly every instance by name and date the way you'd list moon landings. It requires the hitter to do the single hardest thing in professional sports, square up a ball traveling at major league velocity with championship pressure compressing every neuron in his brain, and do it not for personal stats, not for a paycheck, but because literally nothing else is left to try. I will never experience anything resembling this, structurally, in my entire life, because nothing I do has a Game 7. The closest thing is finishing a Sunday crossword with 1 square left and getting the last word right on the first guess, which I will also be bringing up at parties, possibly forever, possibly to people who have heard this story already and have started quietly excusing themselves to get more chips.